This is Jamie Budd. He's the community worker. I think that's your title, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct.
At
Yes.
St Andrews Te Awamutu. So, and he's been in the role something over 3 years.
Yeah.
So, Jamie, to get underway, your job description says that you have the role of bringing initiatives to do with innovative ways of doing mission and of being the church, finding initiatives or creating initiatives to reach new groupings of people. That was your job. So it was very non-church job,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
So how did you get started?
I think one of the first things that I did was have a look at our demographic, recognising that we probably all have very similar demographics, and the fact we've got people who aren't in church at all, have got no relationship with God. We've got those who have spent time with Christ, but again, those Christian refugees, as we've heard that term, new believers, and those that have been in church for a long time. We would call them mature Christians. And I looked at the categories of those kind of groups and thought, how do we create space for them to meet God in a unique way, pertaining to those sort of kind of categories? How do we create a space for those who don't even know God to come into an environment where they can hear God without being so in your face, but it's a way that we do it through sharing who we are and through our lives. So, yeah, I started by creating something for those who aren't in church, because at that stage I thought the Christians, they were right for the moment. Let's look after those who are, we were trying to outreach to. So we created an event called Friends for Food on a Friday night, where we would gather, put the invitation out to our community that we're going to put on a meal for you to come and just build relationships with one another, recognising there's a lot of lonely people in our communities, a lot of people who don't have family or support networks or community engagement. So how can we fill that space? And so, yeah, we put on a dinner every Friday night just to build relationships and connections with people. That was our first initiative that we started.
And how did you go about actually contacting these people? I mean, they're strangers out there, unknown.
Yeah. I've lived in Te Awamutu all my life, so for 45 years. We have a lot of connections already through just relationships we've been in town and already involved in community networks. You've got social media as a great tool at our disposal for things like Facebook and community groups that we have. So we would advertise through those social media streams that are public, not just church ones that stay in-house, but those ones that go out to, 10, 15,000 people in your community about what we're doing. And also getting the church community involved to invite their friends, to bring people along as an opportunity to get them involved in it, which makes it a lot more comfortable for the people that are coming to have someone they already know. So, yeah, it's just a lot of marketing and advertising around the connections that we already have personally through us in the church, and then into the social media world to get as much reach as we could.
So, Jamie, I heard a bit of a rumour that you spent a fair bit of time in a pub.
Yes. So again, one of the avenues that I look at is I'd like to work with men, so that's one of my strengths, and young people. And I thought, how do we get men engaged into just doing life together? And so I thought, why not go to the local pub that we have? It's the only place in Te Awamutu that's got pool tables. Why don't we create a space for the guys just to come and have some play pool together for an hour and a half, build relationships and connections through an environment that is non-threatening. We're not there to advertise, go and get hammered or anything like that, but it's just a space where men feel comfortable from all walks of life to come in and hang out and have some time together. So we did that for over a year and a half. Every Wednesday night for an hour and a half, we would come put some money on the pool table, and we get on average 10, 15 guys from our community who would come on a regular basis to play pool and enjoy each other's company. Some have never been out of their homes for over 7 years. Gone to work, stayed at home, had no relationships, no community around them for men. So, and now we're seeing pockets of these guys getting together outside of these gatherings and doing life together in a group now. So we're establishing friendships that way.
So was that one of the settings where you were inviting people to the Friday meal?
Yes, so what I'm wanting to do is to make sure there's links available. So, hey, look, if you're coming on Friday, come on a Wednesday night, guys, come on Friday. We also hang out and have pool together, because not all environments are suitable for, all conversations. So, guys specifically, there are a lot of things that they want to share their hearts with, but they don't want to do it in a room with, other people, and vice versa. So on Friday night, come to our dinners. Through our youth, get your parents coming along. Everything that we try and do, I tried to link it in to an opportunity for them to come and meet on different environments.
Okay, so tell me about the Friday dinners. Where are they going now?
We felt that season came to an end. We were starting to get around 25, 30, and sometimes up to 45 people coming from our community, and then it took a bit of a dive in numbers, which I don't. Trust me, I don't judge numbers, but we really felt in the Spirit of God that it was time to pull that to an end, but also create a space that they can join into something new that we were creating. One of the things I think we need to recognize is that some things are for a season, and some things we need to stop because God's moving in a different direction. So in that space, I was able, and the team that worked around, to build relationships with people, 50, 60, 70 people from our community that I wouldn't have able to engaged with without that sort of environment.
So seasons.
Yes, absolutely.
And so there's a sort of a sense of experimenting with
what
you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's about listening to God and putting your foot out in faith. I don't think you can do much wrong if you're doing that. Might not be exactly what God was asking you to do, but I think God is graceful enough and loving enough to say, well, that was awesome, but let's just shift a little bit. And if we're keeping connected with what God's wanting us to do, I think, that it's a natural flow.
Okay, so Daryl in many ways has talked about the importance of relationships. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What sort of environment are you trying to create with people?
Yep. So for those who have no relationship with God or no connection to a church at all, the environment we try to create is something that is completely safe. The image of the church from a world perspective is not one that is generally safe or judgmental. So we make sure that we're very warm and welcoming. We want to make sure that they have a space that they can be themselves, which means we have to tell our faces sometimes, not to react to some of the stories that they're sharing, but to let them know that they're okay. It's a safe space for them to be involved in. It's communal. So we just want to love on people. God's in the center of it. That's the heart of why we do what we do. So the love of God in the room, I don't think we should need to overlook that. We've had numbers of people in our community that are, they tend to hop free meals around town, wherever there's one that's going. And I get that, and that's okay. But I've also had comments from them that this is the most comfortable and safest environment that they're in, which means that they're more willing to open up and share their lives with you as you share your lives with them. So, it's got to be a safe space where I'm not throwing the gospel at them. I'm loving them through my stories of what God has done in my life and what God has done in the lives of the people that sit with them. We don't create in those spaces. Like now we've got you in the room. We're going to speak to you for 20 minutes. No, there was an expectation at first for that. And they were kind of prepared for that, but I didn't want to do that because I didn't want them to feel like I was ambushing them. That wasn't our motive. Our motive and our heart was to get to know people and for them to get to know other people as well.
So you mentioned about judgmentalism. So from people from within the church, and the Te Amutu Fellowship is alongside you. Yes. And for those you're reaching who have picked up all sorts of things about the church being judgmental, have you experienced from the people of St Andrews questions? I'm not suggesting they're judgmental, but getting close there. Have you experienced some wonderings from them about what you're doing?
No, I think I've had nothing but support, to be honest. I think because the heart of the role that was established was to how do we grow the kingdom together? How do we create these expressions? I'm just fortunate enough to be involved in the process. along the way because of my heart for Te Awamutu and my heart for people. But I think from a church perspective, they're fully on board and fully supportive. They're wanting to partner with not what I'm doing, but what we're doing collective. And I think that's really important. It's not what I'm doing, it's what we are as a church are doing. You know, sometimes when you might say, hey, look, we're going to meet at the pub, there might be a little bit of, you know, is that right? But I think that's just some people's perspectives. But until you start explaining heart and purpose around that, yeah, it's easily.
So one of your key groups, which was the Friday meal,
Yes.
that came to an end, the season finished.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you been able to create another sort of group?
Yeah. So so one of the things that I wanted to do is to create an opportunity for those who don't know anything about church to come and experience a taste of a community of church people where the environment is more intentional, so that they actually know they're coming to something that is more church focused. So we run a Monday night group called Free to Worship. That is a non-structured service, if you want to call it that, where people get to come in and connect with God in a way that God's designed them to connect with Him. There's no run sheet. There is, it's about the engagement of all in the room, not me or another team leader up the front leading the service. So, I think that's a real special space because it can change. We can turn up on a Monday evening with no plan because we're not sure what God is doing that Monday night. And yet someone from the floor has been wrestling with something all week. And so they come and say, hey, look, I really want to share this. And up the front they go, and the whole rest of the night just explodes because that's exactly what God wanted in that time. It's held very loosely, but it's all about connecting with God and creating an opportunity for those people to meet God in a way that is personal for them.
So you open up the door for people to actually unload the particular issues they're facing. Given the diversity of people, I'd imagine there's been a few challenging things that you've had to handle.
We've had one in particular who, his understanding, his theology, his way of looking at things wasn't in line with probably what we would say is godly. Was quite confused. You right? That way? Whoopsie. Oh, fair enough. So it was about there was something in your spirit that realised that, you got to watch this individual and don't create too much space. We took that to leadership and had a discussion with them about what happens, what should we do in that space, and we just prayed about it. And actually, that person removed themselves from that environment. But I think you just got to press into God and recognise, and listen to His voice. But again, most of the people that come into that environment are those who have been in church for a while but want to be actively involved more in a service. So, hasn't been too many challenges.
Again, linking a little bit to the fellowship alongside the St Andrews people, given what you've said about the need for spiritual discernment, how does prayer feature in what you're doing, and do the fellowship of St Andrews they're part of that scene as well?
Yeah, I think I get a tremendous amount of prayer support from our team. I hear that, I feel that, and it's communicated effectively. What we do, I think, it has to start with prayer. I love Nehemiah. Everything he did was prayer first. Before every gathering, before everything we do, it's committed to God in prayer. Even at our our friends and food evenings on a Friday night, we would start with prayer. It was just we just want to open in prayer, give thanks for the food. People don't mind that kind of environment. So, it's centered on prayer and centered on seeking God's heart before anything and everything that we did.
So when you've got the environment there and in relationship and there's sharing, how do you go about bringing more specific Christian teaching or doctrine or content into what you're doing?
So obviously I've got the different communities that we're looking at. For those who are in church, we have what we're calling pop-up Bible studies. So I've created a space we have created a space on a Wednesday night where I have a gentleman that we work with who has got a gift of teaching. And we create space for him to teach the Word of God. So it's those who are in the church environments or want to go deeper with God, we create a space for them. And it's a pop-up Bible study. It runs for 7 weeks. It's very purposeful. So we've done ecclesiology, we've done eschatology, we're looking at theology proper. It's deep, and it's from someone who's gifted in teaching. Again, utilizing people within our community with the gifts that God has given them. It's not about me being up the front. I don't have that capacity. I go and get just as much out of it as the rest of the people. But we're intentional about taking people on a journey to get closer and deeper in their relationships with God at all stages of their journeys of faith. So that's again on a Wednesday night, but it happens on a Monday night too, through Scripture, through sharing testimonies. On our Friday nights that we were doing, we were always intentional about looking for an opportunity to bring God into the story, whether that's through a little bit of a testimony or just the general language that we would use. God's been amazing. Oh, I'm going to church this weekend, or it's some of those general conversations that we were having that I think we need to be intentional about looking for opportunities share
something
God.
that we touched on earlier on. You said that you have quite a strong sense of call to work with men and youth. So let's just touch base with both of those. Are there some learnings to do with how to build relationships with men that you've discovered?
Yeah, I think men aren't very good at opening up. I think most people recognise that. Men aren't very good at commitment. But, one of the things I realised as a young man growing up, and not having good father figures and our role models in our lives, we need to create opportunities for that. It's about recognising the people and the culture and what they sort of need and trying to fill that gap to get them actively involved, I guess. That's probably, I don't know if that answers the question. So.
But working individually, from what you said earlier on, is a bit more productive than in a group setting?
Yeah, I tend to find from out of our group settings, there's opportunities that rise for more individual, more personal connections. And that's what I'm saying, you've got to look for intentional opportunities. So if someone has hinted at a struggle or sharing an issue that they're going with, there's an opportunity there for saying, hey, do you want to catch up about that throughout the week? I want to sit with you, I want to walk with you through it or help you. So a lot of pastoral care or smaller gatherings happen because of those opportunities. And then all of a sudden you've got your weeks quite full with meeting, having coffees. But what you were doing is you're just being there for them to hear and to listen to what they're saying, and to listen to what the Spirit's saying, and to see how you can be Jesus' hands and feet in that environment and that occasion. So
okay, that's good. Initiatives to do with youth? Yeah,
so our Presbyterian Church in Te Awamutu has 0 young people aged between sort of 12 to 19. I've had a history of working with youth through previous church involvements. I've got 8 children, so I've got a lot of young people in my home themselves. So we have an open door policy in our home. So for me, it was quite easy to create and start a new youth group because I already have connections with multitudes of young people anyway because of just who we are as a family and our position in town. But how do you start a youth group with no one around you? Again, what I recognise is that all of the other churches' youth groups are only advertised internally. You only hear about what's happening as if you belong to the church. There was nothing being advertised to our community about what's happening or what's available for the youth of our town. So I don't call our youth group a Presbyterian youth group. It's called the Te Awamutu Youth Group. And it's advertised in public for the youth of our town, for our town. And I get a huge amount of support from our community people because of that. The police are always connecting me because they have got troubled youth that they work with. They know that I'm trusted to work alongside some of these young people. But we've got a college of 1,200 or 1,100 teenagers just around the corner from our house. And yet collectively in the combined churches in Taumiri, we've probably got about 40, 50 involved in a youth group. So I recognise very quickly what are we creating as a church, the churches of Taumiri, for these young people. What does their environment look like? How do we get them out of their bedrooms and off their technologies, and how do we get them engaged doing life together? How do we let them be young and free? So our youth group is an event-based youth group, again, mainly to build connections and relationships with these young people. I strongly believe, for me, I can't speak into someone's life unless I've got a relationship with them. And so I need to foster that relationship first. Youth will test you. They will challenge your authenticity, whether you are real with them or whether you're just there to tick a box or do an event. So you do get challenged, you do get tested, but the fruit of your sustainability and your heart is huge. So yeah, I'm currently, we've got about 20 to 25 that come on average at the moment. Majority of them are outside of my family. But again, it's a way of creating that space for them to come involved. And what I have found is most of the kids that are coming, it's because their parents are the ones pushing them out of the doors. You know, we have seen a generation of my age disconnect from the church a fair bit, but they recognise the value of the youth that they went through and realise how important it is for their young people. So they are the ones pushing out the door. I'm trying to get their parents' engagement and involvement as much as I am the youth. Because I think if your parents can support their youth and push them out the door into a safe environment that is fun because they experienced it, that's a huge hurdle that we've already overcome.
So I want to finish off with another thing that's written on your job description here.
Right.
Very specifically, it said they were asking you to create initiatives to help people journey to faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so I just want to ask you a question about motivation. You've talked about relationship building and all of that. But underneath that, do you actually have a goal of seeing people come to faith? And a number of us here are probably thinking, is that a reasonable goal to have? So where do you stand? This is what your job description says, brother.
Yeah. I think that's a fairly easy answer because we all should have a goal that people come to a transformative or understanding that Jesus Christ is their Lord and Saviour. I think that's the ultimate goal. The difference on how we get there is incredibly important. My role, I see, is one of sowing seeds. To create an opportunity for them to connect with God. If I see someone, we have seen people give their life to Christ by coming through some of our environments, which has been incredibly encouraging, but I'm also not responsible for their full journey. I'm not responsible for, and the church council has been very supportive about this. It's not about, looking at the bums on seats on a Sunday morning, have we seen growth? Because we recognise that people are on a journey. Some of the gentlemen that we work with, 50, 60-year-old men, they've got a lot of history to process before you might even see them through a church door. But that doesn't mean that they're not on a journey with God and are progressing towards a relationship with Him. And so I think for me, my responsibility, again, I love the fact that we need to create opportunity. It's my key word, right. For them to connect with God and let God speak to their spirit and what He's doing within them, but just create as many opportunities as we can for them to meet God.
So last question, and again exploring your sense of what you're aiming for. Do you have the idea that these folk that you're working with one day is going to join the Sunday fellowship?
No. Because I think we're ultimately got to grow the kingdom, not grow our church. That's a big heart for me, and I think if we're out there to grow the kingdom of God, our churches will grow naturally as people come together to know Christ, know that community is incredibly important and relationships are incredibly important. But Sunday is not the be, for me, is not the be-all and end-all of church. I've wrestled with a lot of language and a lot of stuff personally myself and been on a journey. For me, I don't go to church, I am part of the church, it's 24/7. So if, again, we look at a culture, not everybody's available to go to church on a Sunday through work or other commitments. So if Sunday's your measure, then I think that it's dangerous. If we wanted to have a successful Sunday, go rent a crowd. Serious, for me, if that's how you measure the goal, but I think it's for transformed lives and people walking in authentic relationships with Christ 24/7 is the goal. And I think our churches will grow organically through that. But also, the grace of the Presbyterian Church is that if I've got someone there who wants to connect with the church, the Presbyterian Church might not be the right place for them. They might be best suited with an AOG or a Baptist sort of movement because of who they are and the community that they build up. But again, we're growing the kingdom. And I think that's ultimately what sort of my heart is towards.
All right, Jamie, thank you very much. You can check in with Jamie through the lunch break and so on and dig a little bit deeper. The last thing I wanted to say was that the Presbytery has partially helped to support Jamie through our Mission Initiatives Fund. And it just gives me a chance to say, please remember the fund is there. We are very keen to help fund initiatives such as what Jamie's been involved in, because we see that as sort of beacons of hope for the future. So thanks, Jamie. You survived that, or I did, or something.
Yeah. We all did.